which took place in Germantown, North Carolina in 1929 on Christmas Day. It's one of those stories that has been passed down for generations, and because it was such a long time ago, details might have shifted, certain elements have been exaggerated, and new theories have emerged, which makes it difficult to separate fact from speculation. But we're going to go through all the information available. So, Charlie Lawson was born on May 10th in 1886 to Augustus and Nancy Lawson. Funnily enough, he grew up in Lawsonville in North Carolina, Stokes County. Whilst living there, he met Fanny Manring, and the two quickly connected and bonded, and by 1911 they were married and beginning a family together. They ended up bearing 8 children, but sadly one of their sons, who was either their 3rd or their 4th child, it isn't clear which, ended up passing away at the age of 6 after complications from pneumonia. But at the time of the murders in 1929, the surviving children were 17-year-old Marie, 16-year-old Arthur, 12-year-old Gary, 7-year-old Maybelle, 4-year-old James, 2-year-old Raymond, and 4-month-old Mary Lou. Whilst living in Lawsonville, the family spent a great deal of time with their mother's relatives, who held Charlie, the husband, in very high regard. They saw him as a devoted husband and father with ambitious plans. One of those plans was to move to Germantown, North Carolina, to grow tobacco, and in 1918, that's precisely what they did. 2 of Charlie's brothers, Elijah and Marion, had already relocated there, and Charlie soon followed with his wife and children. When the Lawsons first arrived in Germantown, they worked as sharecroppers, which meant that they farmed land owned by someone else, lived in a small house, and paid rent through a portion of the crops that they grew and harvested. This was a lot of hard work, but despite the challenges, Charlie hoped to eventually own land of his own, and that dream became a reality in 1927. He'd saved enough money to purchase a farmhouse and land along Brook Cove Road. The property included a tobacco barn, farmland, and an old farmhouse. The house was very worn down and far from ideal, but Charlie, Fanny, and their 2 eldest children, Arthur and Marie, spent evenings over the next 2 years making gradual repairs, and even then the family still hoped to eventually build themselves a brand new home from the ground upwards. Wherever they lived, the Lawson family was widely respected. Charlie was known as extremely hardworking, and he often laboured late into the night to maximise his crop yields, and the entire family helped out as much as they could. Neighbours consistently described them as generous, dependable and kind. If someone needed assistance or fell ill, the Lawsons were among the first people to step in and help. A few weeks before Christmas in 1929, Charlie decided to do something special for his family. He took them to Winston in Salem and purchased brand new outfits for everyone in the family. And at the end of the trip, they had a professional family portrait taken, which is quite an uncommon thing to do for a tobacco farmer. It's not like they had a lot of extra money, and this was considered quite a luxurious thing to do. At that time, it was morning of December 25th, 1929, the family woke up on Christmas Day to a fresh blanket of snow, which was around 8 inches thick. Marie, which is the eldest child, got up early to begin baking her well-known raisin cake for Christmas dinner that evening. Charlie and Arthur, his eldest son, prepared to go rabbit hunting with their 2 beagles, Sam and Queen, which is a popular holiday activity in North Carolina, especially at this time period. But at some point they realised that either they didn't have enough ammunition or they didn't have any, it's unclear which. But Arthur was sent into town to purchase ammunition and arrived there at around 1 p.m. Whilst he was in town, Fanny and Marie worked on preparing the Christmas meal. Carrie, aged 12, and Maybelle, aged 7, bundled up and left the house to walk to their aunt and uncle's home nearby to wish them a Merry Christmas. And this was the moment that everything changed. On the way to walking to their aunt and uncle's home, they had to walk past the tobacco barn. And inside, Charlie, their father, was waiting. As they approached, he shot the 2 girls with a 12-gauge shotgun, and afterwards he bludgeoned them with the weapon to make sure that the job was done, dragged their bodies into the barn, and placed rocks beneath their heads, acting like pillows. Charlie then reloaded the shotgun and turned towards the house. Accounts differ as to how Fanny's death played out. Some say that she was sitting on the front porch peeling potatoes. Others claim she was carrying firewood into the house. But regardless of what was going on, Charlie killed his wife next in the entrance to their home. Inside the house, Marie, the eldest daughter, realised what was happening and began screaming. She was standing near the fireplace curling her hair when Charlie shot her in front of the hearth. Charlie then turned on James, aged 4, and Raymond, aged 2. Reports suggested that the children attempted to run away from him and possibly one of them tried to hide behind the oven, but Charlie got to them and shot them both dead. Finally, he goes up to 4-month-old Mary Lou, who was lying in her crib. He doesn't shoot her, but instead beats her to death with the shotgun. Whilst this is all going on, Arthur is still in town, completely unaware of what's happening at home. After his rampage, Charlie flees into the woods at the back of the house. Later that afternoon, Elijah Lawson, Charlie's brother, stops by the house while returning from hunting. He notices that the house is unusually silent because it's normally filled with 8 children and is very loud. So he takes a look inside and discovers Fanny and several of the children dead. Believing that he heard movement in the attic and overwhelmed by the horrific scene, he runs to get help. At around 4 p.m, telegrams were sent to Sheriff John Taylor, Deputy Robert Taylor, Coroner Dr. Helsbeck, and Dr. Robert Bynum, who arrived at the home to check it out and feared an intruder might still be present. A lot of neighbours also turned up to the home bearing arms to help with the investigation, and they surrounded the home whilst the authorities searched inside. Blood trails in the snow led searchers to the tobacco barn, where the bodies of Carrie and Maybelle were discovered. Reports later claimed that the bodies inside the home had been arranged together with their arms crossed and pillows beneath their heads. Though historians acknowledge that these details may have been exaggerated after the case became sensationalized because it became followed the sound, possibly aided by beagles, but again, it's not completely clear, where they found Charlie dead, leaning against a dogwood tree. He had taken his own life. 2 handwritten notes were found in his pockets, written on tobacco auction receipts. One of them read, "Trouble can cause," and the other said, "Nobody to blame but." Neither message was finished, and their meanings remain unclear. No one had any idea what these messages were about. Evidence suggested that Charlie paced around the tree for hours and hours, creating a trench in the snow and mud. There were also reports that he may have washed blood from his hands in a nearby creek, but this was never able to be confirmed. The bodies were first taken to a funeral home in Walnut Cove, but were later transferred to Yelton Funeral Parlour because this smaller funeral home did not have the space required for all these bodies. Dr. C.J. Helsbeck and Spotwood Taylor, who was the brother of the sheriff, worked throughout Christmas night and into the early hours of December 26th, embalming the bodies. As I said, this case gained national attention and even got covered by the New York Times. On December 27th, more than 5,000 people attended the funeral. The family was buried together at Bowder Cemetery, and baby Mary Lou was placed in Fanny's arms and they were buried together. They were also all buried in the brand new clothes that they had recently bought for their family portrait. After the funeral, curiosity surrounding the crime exploded. Crowds visited the Lawson home, where blood still marked the floors. Charlie's brother, Marion, eventually started charging 25 cents for a tour of the house, and he started selling family belongings, even that photograph, that portrait that they had done. Marie's raisin cake became a morbid attraction, to the point where people would pinch a raisin from the cake to take home as a souvenir, so eventually it had to get placed in a glass case to stop people from doing this. Marion claimed that the money he was making from the tours and sales was to help Arthur, the only surviving child, to pay the mortgage for the farm that now belonged to him, which he wasn't prepared for owning on his own. Though later accounts suggest that Arthur had never received any of this money and he ended up losing the farm. With no clear motive as to why Charlie murdered his entire family on Christmas Day, multiple theories began to emerge. Some believe that Charlie wasn't the killer at all, but actually a victim. After witnessing organised crime activity in the area, people think that he was murdered by some sort of criminal gang. Supporters of this theory cite Charlie's good reputation and the lack of forensic evidence tying the gun to him conclusively as reasoning for why they believe he could not have committed such an act against his family that he loved so much. But there's no evidence to support any organised criminal group in the area. Although I suppose if there was one, and it was a good one, then they would probably go unnoticed, but there's nothing out there to suggest that this theory is true. Another theory suggests that Charlie suffered a mental break. Mental illness was obviously poorly understood in the 1920s and just not really known about. Signs may have been there that went unnoticed, but there was mention of Charlie suffering a head injury years earlier after being struck by an axe to the head. A portion of his brain was reportedly removed and sent affecting his mental health. I could see that being a definite possibility. Some believe that he was just straight up a cold killer and that these murders were premeditated. They point to the family portrait and the expensive clothing as an effort to memorialize his family before killing them, interpreting his mention of a Christmas surprise as ominous foreshadowing. They argue that Arthur, the eldest son, was sent away deliberately by Charlie because he was taller than his dad, quite strong, protective, and the only one that was really capable of stopping his father. But a far more disturbing theory emerged decades later. In 1990, Trudy J. Smith published the book White Christmas, Bloody Christmas. During her research, she reportedly received an anonymous call claiming a tour guide once stated that the murders occurred because Charlie had impregnated his 17-year-old daughter, Marie. Trudy Smith had already interviewed Stella Lawson, who was Charlie's brother, Marion's daughter, who later corroborated this claim. Stella said that she overheard relatives at the funeral discussing incest, and that Fanny, Charlie's wife, had confided concerns to family members about an incestuous relationship between her husband and daughter before her death. Stella's mother died in 1928, suggesting that this situation may have been going on for at least a year. 16 years later, the book The Meaning of Our Tears further expanded on this theory. Marie's close friend Ella May claimed that Marie told her she was pregnant with her father's child and that both her parents knew about it. A neighbour, Hill Hampton, confirmed serious problems in the household but refused to elaborate. There's no physical evidence to confirm this theory, but it does seem that a fair few people believe that this was what was going on. Arthur Lawson, the only surviving family member, eventually died in 1945 in a truck accident near Walnut Cove, fueling rumours of a family curse. People claimed there was paranormal activity near the home and in the cemetery, including claims of sightings and voices being heard. These stories led to trespassing issues and barricades having to be put up at the burial site. It seems as if people also tried to create early photoshopped images and photographs of ghosts to help support this theory. But to this day, no definitive motive or reasoning has been proven as to why this tragedy happened. Even the portion of Charlie's brain that was sent away to be examined has since disappeared. But the Elton Funeral Parlour still stands today, but it now operates as a Madison Dry Goods, where they have an upstairs museum that visitors can visit and learn about the case in a respectful and educational way. And that's the case of the Lawson family murders on Christmas Day. Very sad and shocking. It's always a shock when a whole family is murdered by one of the family members. I think the most likely theory, in my opinion, there is potentially, well, it's either the